Today I'm interviewing Angela Kashuba, and I should be calling her at 8. And it's 8.
The bell
Give her
just
a
went
little
off.
time. No, I'm going to give her some time.
You gotta call her right at 8 and be prepared.
But you said... I'll call her at 8.
Good morning, this is Angela.
Good morning. This is Jensen.
Hi, Jensen. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for calling me this morning.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for letting me interview you today.
Oh, sure. It's my pleasure.
So, first question I want to start off with is, when did you know that you wanted to go into the career that you're going into now?
Yeah, so that's a complicated answer. It wasn't straightforward. So I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in high school, and I wasn't really sure. I thought I wanted to go into some sort of medical field, and I thought, maybe I wanted to go to medical school, but my mom actually knew somebody, one of her good friends. Their brother was a pharmacist. And so she told me, pharmacy sounds like a really good career. So why don't you go meet with him and talk to him about pharmacy? And so I did, and I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't completely convinced. And I had sort of an artistic side to me, and so I thought, well, maybe medical illustration would be good because it's sort of medicine, and you also draw and create figures for the healthcare community. So I went to, I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I went to the University of Toronto, a number of open houses that different schools were having. And so I went to the medical school open house, I went to the medical illustration open house, and I also went to the pharmacy school open house. And I was really impressed by the pharmacy students who were running the open house. They were so enthusiastic about what they were doing, and that kind of enthusiasm was catching. And so I decided to go into pharmacy school without really knowing a whole lot about it. And so I was in pharmacy school and I graduated, and then I went and did a residency, and then I worked as part of the medical team in an intensive care unit in a hospital in Toronto. And I was sort of frustrated with how much I still didn't know about medicine and about treating people, and trying to be a more effective member of the medical team. So I decided to go back to school and get my PharmD. And the Doctor of Pharmacy degree was really only available in the States. It wasn't available in Canada at the time. It was still a bachelor's of science in pharmacy. So I decided to go to SUNY Buffalo to learn more about how patients are treated and how to optimize that therapy in patients. And I thought I would end up going back to Toronto, and I would go back to being part of a clinical team, and maybe I would start supervising other pharmacists that were rounding with teams on various floors within the hospital. And part of the program at SUNY Buffalo was to do a research project. And I had a little bit of research experience when I was working in the ICU in Toronto. I was sort of their research pharmacist when they had studies that they were doing in their patients. And so I'd be on call, and I had to come in and dole out the medicine that they were using, and I'd have to work with the pharmaceutical company on the protocol that they were running. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But you had to do a research project at SUNY Buffalo. And as I started working through that research, I realized that was what I really loved to do. I was very excited about it. That's what got me up in the day, was to go after my classes or after my rotations, I would go and work on my research project. And so I kind of changed direction then from going back to Toronto and being a clinical pharmacist and instead doing more research and maybe becoming a faculty member at a university. So I decided after I got my PharmD degree that I would do a postdoctoral fellowship, so I could learn more about the research process and get more skills there. So I stayed in New York and I did a 2-year research fellowship or postdoc, and decided that that was really what I loved. And so I started looking for positions in universities and pharmacy schools. And I picked UNC because even though I interviewed from one coast, out in Washington and Seattle, right to the other coast, to Maryland and to some of the other pharmacy schools in New York, I realized that this was the only place where people were doing research together. Everywhere else I went, everyone had their own research program and they were doing their own thing, but they weren't working with anybody else. And when I came here, I met with people in the medical school, I met with some basic science people, I met with people that were sort of like me, and they were all working together, and their research was so much more interesting and so much stronger because they were working together than working kind of in silos, that I decided UNC was the place to be. And so that's how I started here.
That's
now my research. Sorry, go ahead.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's sort of a roundabout. It took me a long time to figure out where I really belonged.
Yeah.
So by the time I came here, and I was 30, because I'd gone out and worked for a while, and then I went back to school, and I did some more training. But all of those skills that I picked up along the way really came together in the career that I'm doing now. But when I got here, where the School of Medicine really needed help was in the area of HIV. And I didn't know anything about HIV. I was more focused on infectious diseases, but more bacteria, and using antibiotics to treat difficult infections, skin infections, or infections that were in the gut, or brain infections. I had really no experience in HIV at all, but that was where the need was, and that was a good place to be where good collaborators were. So I had a really steep learning curve to try and figure out what HIV is, how people are treating HIV, and what the questions are in HIV, and how do we solve questions that are causing patients problems and that are causing doctors problems when they're treating their patients. So I kind of took a leap. I went out of my comfort zone and tried to learn as much as I could about HIV, and that's sort of where I am now. So even when I came to UNC, I had a set of skills, but not really any knowledge in the field that I ended up working in. So that was kind of a learning curve, and it was frustrating along the way, but I eventually got it and figured it out, and have just a terrific group of people that I work with now.
Yeah. At a younger age, did you have like a different career path that you wanted to go into, like a dream job?
Yeah, so my parents sat me down one day and they said, okay, let's talk about what kind of career you want, and let's talk about what sort of lifestyle you want. And at the time, I was thinking, I want to live in a fancy condominium in downtown Toronto, and I want to be able to travel, and I want to have really nice things. And so, I had this kind of pipe dream of being sort of a mover and shaker in downtown Toronto. And they said, well, let's cost this all out. Let's talk about, how much these things would cost. And then we worked backwards, and they said, okay, you need to earn this amount of money if you want to have that sort of a lifestyle. Now, what kind of careers are going to get you there? And so we talked about, like, in the medical profession, because I was still sort of working towards the healthcare field. And so it really turned out, like, we narrowed it down to a few, but ophthalmology seemed to come out on top. If you're an ophthalmologist or an eye surgeon, that, you know, that would give me the lifestyle that I wanted, plus the type of income that I would need to support that kind of lifestyle. So I was sort of focused on, well, maybe I really do need to do medicine, and maybe I need to go into ophthalmology as a specialty. So but I didn't really have any specific career goals before that time. I was just sort of working my way through high school, and I was in a gifted program, but I don't think I was all that gifted. I was sort of at the bottom of my gifted class. I really had to work hard compared to my friends who just sort of got physics and got calculus and didn't really have to work that hard at it. I had to, like, really study my butt off to try and keep up. And so I was just focused on getting good grades and keeping up and not even thinking about what was next for me. So I didn't really have, you know, one specific job in mind until kind of towards the end of high school. My parents were like, well, let's really talk about this and talk about, you know, where you need to go in order to have the kind of lifestyle. But I even didn't know. I grew up in kind of a lower middle class neighborhood, and I didn't really. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and so I really didn't understand higher level professions. My mom worked in a lab as a lab tech. My dad was a sheriff's officer, and you know, the people around me, the families around me, were just sort of kind of blue collar workers, and so I didn't really understand anything about professional programs.
Yeah. What kind of obstacles did you have to overcome to get to where you are now in your life?
So one was you're going to university, because nobody in my family could really help me with that, because nobody had gone to college or gone to university or understood, well, how do you apply for college, and how do you choose a college, and if you get offers coming back in, how do you decide which college to go to, and what happens when you get to college? And so all of those things were new, and you know, my mom would go with me to places, but couldn't really advise me on, you know, what a good decision was, because she didn't really know either. So that was something that I had to kind of work through on my own. Finances were an issue, and so you know, I was working a lot to try and compensate for tuition, because I went to the University of Toronto first. I lived at home. I didn't live in the dorms because we couldn't really afford that. So you know, that was a bit of a challenge, not living on campus and kind of being part of the campus community, just sort of being a commuter. So that was a bit of a challenge. And then just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was just kind of going through school because opportunities were sort of presenting themselves, but it wasn't really until I was, I guess, 28 that I actually figured out what I wanted to do and what really got me excited to get up in the morning and to go work. So it really took me a while to figure out my path.
Yeah. So, like, for someone like me wanting to go into the medical field, what kind of advice would you give?
So I would try and volunteer in as many places as you can. You know, if you're interested in pharmacy, see if you can volunteer at a pharmacy, or you know, if there's a paying job within a pharmacy, you know, to try and understand what that's like. Or if you want to go into medicine, maybe volunteer in a clinic or volunteer in a hospital, so that you can get an understanding of what that's like, or dentistry or nursing. I think having that experience and seeing other people in those jobs would really help. And I didn't really have that. I didn't know I should do that. And I volunteered at a hospital as a candy striper when I was in high school. But that still wasn't exactly, that didn't really exactly teach me what other professions were doing. And people are so interested in having high school students come and see what they do, or even just shadowing for a day, that I think, anyone that you would call up and say, you're really interested in this, can you spend a day with them, or can you volunteer, on a few hours a week, just to kind of get a sense of what people are doing and what really seems to resonate with you, I think would be a good thing to do.
Okay. Do you have any, inspiring quotes that get you through life and, get you through the day?
Yes. So there's one by Nelson Mandela that we actually have on the wall that says, "It always seems impossible until it's done." And that is something that my lab now, that we live by. I feel like we do the impossible almost every day. Things that people say, absolutely can't get done. This is a problem that can't get solved. My group solves those problems. And so that quote by Nelson Mandela really rings true. And in fact, I have a lab meeting every week, and I put some sort of inspirational quote at the bottom of that lab meeting agenda every week that sort of rings true for me for the week. So there's lots of them that we've gone through, but that one from Nelson Mandela, "It always seems impossible until it's done," is the one that really encompasses through my career and what we do now in the lab.
What do you find the hardest in your job?
The hardest. I think it's trying to balance everything. It's trying to make sure that whatever I do, I give 100% effort into. It's trying to make sure that everyone in the lab, I have about 20 people in my lab, that everyone in the lab is taken care of. I run one of the divisions in the School of Pharmacy. We have about 30 faculty in our division, so I oversee them to make sure that they, I'm touching base with them and that they are getting what they need and they are taken care of. Working with my collaborators, my laboratory now works with we have our own research program that we run, but we also work with about 100 investigators a year around the globe that we help them do their research. So it's making sure that we're meeting their needs as well. So, and also making sure that, my family's needs are met as well. I have a 12-year-old son who plays hockey and a 14-year-old daughter who plays soccer, and so we're traveling all the time and trying to fit in practices and tournaments and games. And so it's just, making sure that nobody is feeling neglected and that people are getting what they need to be happy at work and to get the job done at work, and also to make sure that everyone's happy at home and that we still have family time and we still get to do things together as a family. So I think that's the most challenging thing. And there are some weeks where the family takes more precedence than the people at work, and sometimes there's weeks where people at work take more precedence than the family. But I think trying to just maintain that balance and making sure that nothing gets neglected. I think that's the most challenging part of the job, but also the most rewarding when you know that everyone has what they need to do the best job that they can.
Yes. Well, I just want to thank you again for letting me interview you and answering all my questions.
Okay. If you have any additional ones, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to talk to you more. And if you or any of your friends have any questions about pharmacy, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I'm happy to talk to you guys about that.
Yes, ma'am, I will. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good luck.
Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. You too.